you for attending our AGM. Many of you are already familiar with the company, so I'm not going to labour over the background too much. I will skip through all of this. Many of you are familiar with the detail here, but I'll focus specifically for the purposes of this presentation on the Red Rabbit project. This is the main asset of the company, referred to by Michael Spriggs in the chairman's statement. Red Rabbit project comprises all of these licenses, essentially shown in blue here. The Kızıltepe sector of Red Rabbit, sitting down here. This is the area that we've been focused on for the purposes of our definitive feasibility study and all of our environmental impact approvals process. Within what we call the Sundırgı Gold Corridor, which is a trend of gold mineralisation that runs broadly northeast from Kızıltepe through Kepez, Karakava, Kızılçukur. It's an epithermal gold-silver province, of which we've tested very little. So far, the focus has been on Kızıltepe alone. In the distance over here, about 75 kilometres as the crow flies from Kızıltepe, is the Tavşan prospect area. We have a further 215,000 ounces in resources, inferred, indicated, at Tavşan. But we're essentially ignoring Tavşan at the moment, and I want people's attention to be firmly focused on Kızıltepe and what we're about to achieve there. On Tuesday, we announced the completion of our definitive feasibility study, which is a major advancement for the company. There were no great changes to some previous numbers that we reported in our interim feasibility study of October last year. So the JORC reserves, so those are the gold reserves that sit within the economic pits, open pits, is 1.1 million tonnes of 3.1 grams per tonne gold and 39.8 grams per tonne silver. That will satisfy a mine life of approximately 8 years, although what we are doing is to provide infrastructure that enables us to continue mining beyond the currently planned 8-year mine life. So we've specifically designed the TSF, which is the tailings storage facility, to cope with 15 years full production capacity at a rate of 150,000 tonnes per year. Producing at 150,000 tonnes per year at those sort of average grades will provide us about 21,000 ounces gold equivalent production, certainly for the first 5 years of operation, as we're mining what we call the Arzu South pit. As we move to subsidiary pits, we'll see the grades slightly drop off, and we'll be producing less than that 21,000 ounces for years 6, 7 and 8. But of course, within that 5-year window, we've got the potential at Kepez, Karakava and Kızılçukur, and with further exploration, we expect to find additional resources that we can truck down to the Kızıltepe plant post year 5. Now a word on the EIA process. We submitted our EIA summary documentation to the Ministry of Environment in early February this year. It's a process that's now regulated by the Ministry of Environment in central government in Turkey. We started that process initially with a public consultation meeting that was held in March, and that was held in the local village adjacent to Kızıltepe here. And many locals from surrounding villages joined us for that meeting, as well as representatives from the Ministry of Environment, from the mayoral office in Sundırgı, which is the nearest town over here, and a number of other interested parties. The meeting kicked off with a presentation given by SRK Consulting in Turkey, who are specifically been engaged by the company to complete all of our EIA documentation in line with Turkish government requirements. There were also the representatives of the Ministry of Environment that governed the meeting, but we opened up a forum for locals to ask as many questions as they wanted of us, of SRK Consulting, and indeed of the Ministry of Environment. And that meeting went extraordinarily well. We've got all the local support we could have wished for to get this project up and running. Shortly thereafter, we moved into a ministerial consultation meeting at the head offices of the Ministry of Environment in Ankara, and that meeting also went very well. There were certain items within the EIA that they wanted SRK to focus on for the final report, and that work is now underway and is due to be completed by around September. So we expect EIA approval from the Ministry of Environment at around September this year. I should also add that following our ministerial consultation meeting, we're in receipt of a letter, formal communication from the Provincial Directorate of the Ministry of Environment in Balıkesir, which is the largest city, sort of located over here on the map, and they are in full support of this operation as well. They've reviewed the positioning of our mine site, tailings dam, waste rock dump, and they're satisfied that we've met the requirements. Now, a joint venture on the Red Rabbit project is with the Turkish construction firm called Precea Construction. They're based in Ankara. There are 4 partners behind that company. 2 of them are mining engineers, one of them's a geologist, and the other's an architect by background. But they have focused their entire career since 2005 on construction projects that vary from building villas, to building hotels, casino complexes, to barracks for the Afghan army, to police barracks for, again, the Afghan police force. And specifically, they've got a branch of their company that deals with gold and silver processing plants. And I'll talk about that particular branch in the following slide. But I want to just talk through the nature of our joint venture with Precea, the structure of it, as per our shareholders' agreement. Now, Precea have to spend a full $8 million to earn into 50% of the joint venture entity that we've established, which is called Zenit Madencilik. They've now spent 1.4, they've probably spent about 2.5 now, in fact. So they're now into the phase 2 financing of the JV. And management control has already switched to Precea. We've got 3 of their representatives on the Zenit JV board against 2 of ours. I'm one of the board members. Based on the current status of the earning, Precea currently have 18% of the project. We've got the remaining 82%. So that once they've finished their expenditure as committed here, they will then get to the 50%. This slide shows the background of Precea, and really everything is told by this picture. This is the ADR circuit of the Kışladağ gold mine in Turkey. So it's not only Turkey's largest gold mine, it's Europe's largest gold mine. There's about 16 million ounces in resource there, operated by our other JV partners, Eldorado Gold. But this ADR circuit, which is a rather large plant, it's everything that you can see here in the foreground, and including the tanks, the settling ponds out here, was installed by Precea Construction under subcontract to Summit Valley, who were the prime contractors for that project. This project is what kicked off their gold-silver EPCM side of the Precea business, and they've gone on to install the new electrowinning circuit at Masra Gold Mine, which is operated by Koza Gold. They manufactured and commissioned the new Merrill-Crowe circuit at Europe's largest silver mine, owned by Eti Gümüş, and they've been involved in a number of other mine builds, primarily in the Middle East, from Algeria through to Iran, Azerbaijan most recently, an incredible operation which they managed to complete within the space of 6 months, from start to finish, on a gold plant plus heap leach pads. And now their largest single EPCM contract is for Polyus Gold at the Natalka project in Magadan in Far Eastern Russia. So an exceptionally experienced team that they know exactly how to put these facilities in place, and they're very keen, as our partners and indeed our shareholders, to see this company evolve in joint venture and in our own right into a gold mining company. This is a satellite image over the top of the Tibet Deposit, showing the infrastructure as designed for the definitive feasibility study. These are the pits, these black blobs here. Arzu South is the primary reserve, so this is the vein system that we'll be mining over the course of the first 5 years. Once we've exhausted that, we'll be moving to the subsidiary pits of Banu, Derya and Arzu North. The tailings storage facility, as I mentioned, will have a capacity for 15 years of life. As you can see, it's tucked up inside a valley here. It's actually not within line of sight of the nearest settlement because there's a slight rise here. It's a very low impact site, both for the tailings storage facility and just about everything else that we've got, which is important. Another thing that's worth drawing people's attention to is the fact that we've now secured almost all the freehold land over the Aau South Pit area, including the road diversion area here. There are a couple of slivers of land that we still need to acquire. There's one just down here at the tail end of the pit. There's one small sliver that runs through the centre of the pit, but those negotiations are currently underway. Actually, before I move on, I'll just draw your attention to this area here. Tail end of Aau North, on the northwest end of it, to the southern end of Aau North, that wooded area. Just bear that in mind if you move to the next slides here. I'll jump slides, I'll come back to the DFS study in a moment. So now that's zoomed in on the Aau Central area, as we call it, so between the Aau South Pit and the Aau North Pit. We undertook some drilling last year in this area based on existing forestry permits, and those forestry permits were not ideally located for testing this vein system in the best way that we could have, although we did test what we call the ML vein, which is the extension on Deria. One of those holes, drilled back this way, intercepted bonanza gold and silver grades. And it's an extremely exciting hole because we've never seen grades like this on the Tibet Deposit to date. And it certainly indicates that we've got continuity of mineralisation under a sequence of cover rocks that caps the vein here. It was not an obvious area to drill initially, and it's one of the reasons why we're only getting around to doing this work now, because we had many other veins to drill test, all of which were outcropping. But this is a somewhat harder area because we don't physically see the veins. We have to drill from cover rocks into the underlying volcanic sequence, and that's where we're intercepting these veins. The other hole that or rather two holes that we drilled, were collared from here, drilling back this way. So right at the tail end of the Aau North structure. And these holes were perhaps the most encouraging of all because they absolutely proved that this vein system does continue undercover in that direction. We see geophysical anomalies that are linear, broadly linear, running between Aau North and Aau South, both in resistivity and chargeability. And those signatures give us cause to believe that this vein system is developed through here. But that hole tested that hypothesis and provided a positive result. So the next thing we want to do is test further along this structure, which we call Aau Central. So imagine now that we're looking in cross-section through that Aau North, Aau South vein system and at Aau Central. The colours on this section are essentially the contoured gram-metre intervals. So it's the gold accumulation over metres that are projected into that plane. So the purples are high gram metres, and the sort of yellow colours, greys, are low gram metres. You can see a broad pattern here of higher grade shoots, and interestingly they seem to occur at relatively regular spaced intervals, and this is a very important indicator for our future exploration. And it does suggest that we've got these plunging shoots of mineralisation that are structurally controlled within the vein system. We need to test all of these ideas, and we've planned drill holes to test down plunge of a number of these high grade shoots there. But this is one of the more exciting things because it's so new. We didn't know about it until we completed those drill holes last year. Those holes that I mentioned that tested undercover intercepted this zone out here. Now you can see in this black line, that's the outline of the currently defined Aau North open pit. That was based on the existing resource. So these holes are outside of the existing resource, but they're exceptionally high grade, good widths, and it looks like we've got another plunging chute of high grade mineralisation running undercover there. Beyond that, we've also got this zone to test out with these holes initially. Collared in the upper ignimbrite sequence, the cap rock essentially to the veins, and targeting the vein system which we expect to be developed in the lower ignimbrite sequence. So within that area as a whole, just that gap, we expect, based on geological modelling, a target of approximately 100,000 ounces overall. And that would significantly add to the mine life. Obviously, we'd have to tackle that as an underground operation if it is indeed there. We'd have to certainly target for high grades. But we could potentially access that from underground development from the bottom of the Arzu South Pit, or indeed just straight onto the high grade zone over there from the Arzu North Pit. But it's a very exciting development for the company. Right, now I'll just track back to the definitive feasibility study, which we announced on Tuesday. Now, we established the feasibility study with a base case of $1,304 gold and $22.6 silver. Obviously, we've seen a dramatic movement in the gold price in just the last week. So, in any case, it doesn't matter too much because we've provided the minus 10, 20, 30 cases and also the positive cases. If you look at perhaps a closer gold price, 1,174, we're still robustly economic. And I'll also draw your attention to the cash costs, which we brought down substantially from the earlier interim feasibility study, and that was primarily as a result of a reduction in contractor mining quotations. So even at the minus 30 case, if you're a pessimist about gold, at least it's still positive. And there aren't many gold mines in the world that can say that. And a lot of the large producers are operating, well, there are some that are operating at that and higher at the moment, and they're going to be squeezed. So this makes our project, of those small, highly attractive. And I think we're seeing the interest from banks and other institutions on the basis of that. Now, obviously, this model was established on a pre-tax basis. Our very next stage is to take the final feasibility study and submit that to a Turkish tax specialist to look at the post-tax numbers, but in particular how the company can take advantage of a number of new tax incentive schemes that have been introduced by the government, very specifically for the mining sector. The Turkish government last year announced that mining was considered a strategic high priority, so they introduced this raft of tax incentive schemes, and companies are taking advantage of this, and I have heard of cases where corporation tax has been reduced all the way to 5%. I don't know what the case will be for us, we've got to look at that in detail, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be less than 20 at the end of the day. The state royalty, I should point out that these cash costs are inclusive of all on-site, off-site charges, so that's including the GNA. It's inclusive of the state royalty and the 2.5% net smelter return that's payable to Franco-Nevada. So that's essentially an all-in cash cost. The state royalty is very competitive in Turkey, and there's no indication that that's going to change. Right. Broader exploration potential within the Sundurga Gold Corridor. So all of this we consider the Kızıltepe sector of Red Rabbit. Remember when at the beginning of the presentation I said just ignore Tavşan. Tavşan we'll get to at the end of the day once we've got Kızıltepe up and running. But I want people's attention to be firmly focused on Kızıltepe and surrounding prospects. So our intention is to establish the gold processing plant down here at Kızıltepe. We've got a small part of the existing resource base at Kepez, which is very high grade, and we're hopeful that we'll find other high grade pods within this area that we can periodically feed to the Kızıltepe plant. That's a distance of about 6 kilometres, so it's very easy trucking distance. Karakavak, an extensive low sulfidation vein system, almost identical to Kızıltepe, although admittedly the grades that we see at surface are somewhat lower than Kızıltepe. The system is very well developed there. We haven't yet drill tested that, and that's certainly something that we need to get round to doing. Total trucking distance from Karakabak to Kızıltepe would be of the order of about 20 kilometres. So again, not very far at all. Yukarıçamlı license was a license we acquired in auction last year, and it was very important for us because it was another area that showed potential for the continuity of the mineralisation that we see spaced along the Sundarbans Gold Corridor. There's a very interesting regular spacing of prospects. And we've gone on now to do some initial reconnaissance exploration in the Yukarıçamlı license, and we have indeed seen encouraging gold grades from this area here, exactly as we predicted. But still, there's a long way to go yet. We've got to do a lot more work. Kızılçukur, very exciting prospect. We acquired that from Kefi Minerals back in 2011. At that time, the license was just due to expire, and we had to convert it to operational status, which we did last year. And we also had to apply for new forestry permits so we could gain drill access. We've now secured those forestry permits, so this project is now ready to be drilled. And in that sense, it's the most ready-to-go project that we've got within the vicinity, other than Kızıltepe and Kepes. So later on this year, perhaps into next, certainly when we start construction, this is a project that we will want to be drill testing. Total trucking distance from Kızılçukur down to Kızıltepe, a bit further, 75 kilometres by road. So as long as our grades are of the order of about 2.5 grams per tonne, 2 to 2.5 grams per tonne, that's still doable, it's manageable. Çamlıurfa is again another licence that we acquired relatively recently. Again, we found some encouraging grades, not at that location, it's actually over here, and we need to do some further work on that as well. Now, these licences, the ones shown in blue here, sit within the Red Rabbit joint venture with Procea Construction. These ones, and that one there, are 100% held by Ariana. If we identify resources at Kızılçukur, for instance, at a point of our choosing, we can sell those resources into the Zenith joint venture for 3 times exploration cost. But that's at our discretion, and of course only if Zenith wants it. But if we've defined something that's clearly mineable up there, they will definitely want it. And now, just to really end, what else we're doing in Turkey. The most important joint venture that we've got outside of Western Turkey is the Eldorado Gold JV. We drill tested that last year. It was the 3rd phase of drilling, in fact, of the Salınbaş discovery. We did the drilling, so that was our drill team working up there at the peak of Salınbaş, and they did a really cracking job. We managed to get sufficient data to produce the first resource estimate, which is just over 1 million ounces in inferred and indicated. And that sits between the Ardalı copper-gold porphyry and the Salınbaş prospect, which was the new discovery made. And the very interesting thing is it looks like this mineralisation continues between those two. And this is exactly what Eldorado are drill testing today. They've got a team on site now. They're even looking at potentially bringing a second rig in to get as much drilling done as possible before the winter sets in. So they've committed just over $2 million to the exploration this year, and we also handed management control of that JV back to them because we want to remain focused on what we're trying to achieve at Kızıltepe. And then off in southeastern Turkey, we've got our footprint investment in Tigris Resources. Tigris is undergoing a very significant financing now, and they're planning to continue drilling the Kolonkaya project, from which we obtained some very encouraging initial results last year. And the last thing that's worth mentioning is our access to Newmont's exploration database for Turkey. It's a 10-year non-exclusive license to the database, but we've essentially been given access to everything. So all work that Newmont did over 20 years in the country, which includes a vast number of samples that are distributed as shown on that map. So they essentially blanket covered all of the prospective regions in Turkey over 2 decades. Beyond that, we've also recently taken on board Miles McAllister, who was the ex-Newmont exploration manager for Turkey, but still lives in Turkey. He's now retired from Newmont, but we've tasked him to pull together a whole raft of targets out of this database of places that he would go next. You know, if he were acting at Newmont still, where would he go next? So that process is underway. Beyond that, we're focused very specifically on the area around Red Rabbit, because obviously any resources that we identify in the vicinity of Red Rabbit have a greater value to the company and ultimately to our shareholders than, let's say, resources that we find off in Far Eastern Turkey. So a very important development for the company in the long term, because this is essentially, as Michael de Villiers often likes to point out, this is the treasure map. I tend not to like saying that, but I think it's right. So, well, thank you very much, and if you've got any questions, be happy to take them.
Yeah, this is an exclusive database, so
Yeah.
Are there other companies actively exploring it as you are now?
There's one other company that has access to this beyond Newmont, and that's Gold, Turkey's second largest gold producer. Gold no doubt have used it, but they perhaps haven't used it as extensively as we might be able to use it, because we've retained the services of Miles McAllister. So that's our very specific strategic advantage. And we've had a good relationship with Newmont since the very beginning of this company in Turkey. And as a result of that rapport, we're able to leverage.
So the fact that it's not exclusive doesn't mean it's open to everyone.
It's not open to everyone. They wouldn't give it to everyone, because then they'd lose. It would lose value if it was
Right.
open to everyone. So they've been very focused about who they give access.
Eldorado, are they increasing their interest in Turkey?
They are, I would say. Let me just come back to. Hold on. Eldorado operates the Kışladağ gold mine in Turkey, which is the country's largest, indeed Europe's largest. So that's located not all that far from us. So Kışladağ mine here. They've got one other active mine called FM Çukuru, which is also quite sizable, just over 2 million ounces. They've also got operations in China. They obviously acquired European goldfields, so they're trying to develop the North Greek assets. They've got Certej in Romania. But they really do like Turkey because it's relatively low cost. I mean, they're producing gold at Kışladağ, I understand, at $350 an ounce. That's their cash cost. There are other producers in Turkey that are operating at those sort of levels. Çöpler, which is owned by Alisa Gold, or Alisa, and they're producing at $375 an ounce. So compared to Eldorado's global average cost of production, Turkey is the lowest cost place to operate. And I think people have seen that. There's a huge amount of interest in Turkey now. There was a special presentation given at the last PDAC, and that was very well attended with representatives of the the Foreign Investment Support Agency that reports into the Prime Minister's office, providing presentations. There were, I believe, presentations on the new Turkish tax incentive schemes and so on. So, people are still flooding into the country to bring gold mines on stream. And then beyond the 7 currently operating mines, there's another 7 that's scheduled to go into production soon, including our own.
Garcia got 50%, or will they have 50% of everything you've shown us, Eldorado as well?
No, they won't. What they will have 50% of once they've spent their full $8 million are these licenses here. So not that one,
I see, yeah.
not those 3, just those licenses here and the Tavşan licenses.
Well, that's good. So they haven't actually bought 50% of the firms.
No.
And could you turn back now to that chart with all the cost? cost per ounce.
Yes.
Because you didn't tell us what the 2, 3, and 4 and 5 column, they mean that US NPV.
Oh, okay. So net present value figures at discount rates of 8% to 10%, and the project internal rate of return. So essentially the rate of return for a zero NPV.
It's a reflection of the fact that money has a time value. So you
Yes.
can relate everything back
To a present value.
It's present value.
So as long as those figures, the NPVs, are positive, you can view a project as being worth entering. But obviously, if you had a choice between two projects, typically the higher NPV figure between those two projects is the project you'd opt for. But in our case, we've got one project. They're all positive across the model range, plus 30 to minus 30.
The most important column is the last column, isn't it? Cash cost.
Yeah, that's and I think that's what we're seeing from the discussions that we're having. People like to see these sort of numbers, and there are very few producers in the world that can do that.
Yeah, but it doesn't it doesn't look particularly good compared to the investment you have to make in it.
Well, the investment we have to make in it is $25 million. In terms of, that's the debt component,
Yes.
because if we have $5 million coming in from Presea, plus 25 in debt for the sake of argument, for $30 million total capex, that's investment today, payback within, let's say, two and a half years, and then we've got a full 8 years of mine life thereafter.
Yes, but the price may drop in that interval for a few months or something, or a year or two.
Well, it might, and that's why it's important to demonstrate that there is a positive NPV over the entire model range. We could, if we did the minus 40 case, okay, the minus 40 case would probably just take us into negative territory, but then that's, gold price of 800.
Yes. In which case everybody would stop.
Yes.
The
Exactly.
price of gold might go up then.
Well, exactly. I mean, the South African operations were just shut down. I mean, even here, it's getting tight for the majority of world producers.
World average production costs between $800 and $900 an ounce.
Yeah. And places like Australia. Australia's really got very high costs. There are producers there in Western Australia, $1,200, $1,300 an ounce. They're already ruling themselves out of the game.
I heard yesterday, last night, that gold might go down to 1,000 and then go back up again.
That's what they're saying, but I don't think anyone wants to believe anything anymore. We've just got to, as a company, we've just got to focus on achieving it.
Do you have any concerns at all about Syria?
No. The Syrian conflict is not spilling over into Turkey. Obviously, there may come a time when NATO, the world community, wants to intervene in Syria, and Turkey would, based on prior performance in that area, would probably support that, as they did in the case of Libya. But they wouldn't want to be seen to support it overtly because they're in geopolitically there. They have to be sensitive.
What are the chances of the resource at Kiziltepe being much bigger than 200,000?
Well, this is why we're so interested in this area between Arzu South and Arzu North, because all of the evidence stacks up in favour of this vein system continuing all the way through here. Now, based on the initial drill testing that we've been able to complete, that model, that hypothesis holds true because we intercepted this high-grade zone out here. If we are able to drill test that area and drill test down plunge, we'll be talking about these sort of figures as additional resources. So that's essentially a doubling of total mineable reserve. And that would have a tremendous impact on the project.
And Procea aren't involved in that one, are they?
Well, they are, because this is within the Zenit joint venture license. Yeah. So, in that case, any exploration that's undertaken through here is undertaken at cost to Zenit. But obviously, any resources or reserves that we identify in this area, we'd own 50%
are
of.
a huge firm, aren't they? So they're
Yes.
compared to any large UK building firm, I suppose.
Yes.
Taylor Woodrow or something like that.
It wouldn't be that large. I mean, including all their site teams, they can go up to about 1,000 staff globally. So it's not a huge company, but it's sizable.
You need to work all over the world, anyway.
Yeah.
Have you any indication that the gold veins could go deeper or not?
There is an indication that the vein system does continue. We certainly see that over here, because all of our drilling to date was our strategy has been very much focused on what can be mined via open pit, and so our drilling was limited by those parameters. We'd drill test to depths of around 100, maybe 120 metres and no more. The deepest hole on the project to date was one undertaken by Newmont in 2002, so before we acquired the project, and they put one hole in that was about 230 metres below surface. And that intercepted vein, although they ended the hole in the vein. So they didn't actually continue all the way through, so we don't actually know how thick that intercept really is. But it just shows that it's there. These other blobs that we've got here are our planned holes. So those have been designed to test out the down plunge continuity of these high-grade shoots, particularly at the southern end of Arzoo South, where the grade does improve dramatically.
So all your mining is open pit mining, is it?
The feasibility currently is all open pit.
So how many men do you employ for that?
It will be 100 people on site. Contractor mining, so we don't have to buy our own fleet. As I said, we've got a very competitive contractor mining quote now from one of Turkey's largest open pit contractors. They were the previous open pit contractors for Eldorado during the Kışladağ mine startup, so they're hugely experienced.
So you're not employing the local villagers or something?
We will be, because there will be all the other site teams, certainly during the construction stage, and then on into commissioning and production. Initially at the plant site, obviously you need some very skilled people, metallurgists and the like, but over time with training, a lot of the more routine tasks, even within the plant, we can start handing over to the villagers, and we've made that very clear to them, because obviously they want jobs. So I would say that of the 100 people, we'll probably get to 80 being hired locally.
In these big pits you dig out, then the men aren't there with shovels. You've got machines to sort of stuff out.
Yeah, it will be drill and blast. Rotary drilling, blasting, and then coming in with essentially mechanical diggers.
Bit you had on the picture.
Yeah, what happens is in the open pit there's a spiral ramp that starts here and it spirals into the pit. So once the pit is essentially complete, its maximum depth will be 110 metres with the spiral ramp out. Once the ore comes out of the plant, it will be taken out of the pit, it goes straight to the plant, where there's crush, grind, the ball mill, and then it goes into the carbonate column, carbonate leach circuit, and then we produce a gold doré there. Any waste coming from the pit goes on this other road out to the waste rock dump.
pretty tricky driving down 100 metres down and back up again.
Yeah, well, they're used to it.
How scalable will the plant be?
There is capacity for scaling that's already built into the design. We've probably got capacity of a 30% increase within current design.
Right.
The limiting factor, if we go beyond that, is the crushing and grinding. We wouldn't have the capacity of the jaw crusher, the cone crusher, and the ball mill.
Right.
So we'd have to put in maybe a parallel ball mill.
Basis that you might develop
If we find significant additional resources, maybe at lower grade, I mean, depending on what the gold price is doing, of course. But if it's of lower grade but higher tonnage, then we'd want to increase the throughput quite dramatically. So it's designed for 150,000 tonnes a year, but we can take that up probably to the order of 200,000 tonnes within current design, if push came to shove.
Would the preference be to try and increase the mine life against the production, or is it?
Our preference would be to increase mine life. Yeah, I think there's good social reason to do that as well, because no one wants a 2-year project. Something like this could be mined out in 2 or 3 years if it were designed that way, but then that would never fly when you're presenting it to the local people. You've got to design something that will hang around for a while, create jobs, build on that, build on people's skill sets in the local community.
I know it's in the waste dump, that's the waste rock. But what's in the blue one?
That's the tailings dam. So once the material is crushed and ground and goes into the leach tanks, what comes out is a sort of more sludgy material, and it goes through a cyanide destruction circuit to essentially bring cyanide levels down to zero. It's never going to be completely zero, but it goes down to zero. And Turkey places some very strict limits on what can be discharged. And then there's a process to take any excess water out of that pulp, that slurry, and then we pump the remaining slurry out to the tailings dam. So it's a settling pond, if you like, which ultimately, at the end of the day, will just be full of sediment, very fine sediment. And initially there'll be a thin layer of water on the top, but obviously we'd reclaim as much of that as possible as well for the process plant. Then once mining's finished, that would be completely settled, it would dry out. There'd be no cyanide left at all, because cyanide is destroyed under ultraviolet radiation from the sun. And what we would do is we'd cover that with reclaimed earth, and then plant trees over the top of it. So it would essentially disappear.
Good.
Very good. No more questions? Karen?
Are you thinking of going across the border into Armenia?
I think that would be a little bit difficult for a
Yeah,
Turkish-led company. But no, Armenia is a great place. I mean, Armenia's got some fantastic opportunity, but just for that political reason, that sensitivity, it would be awkward. Though Azerbaijan is a possibility, and obviously Prussia have interests in Azerbaijan. So in the future, but we've got no plans to do that now. We've got to get this up and running. We've got to get cash flow positive on this, and then we can look at broadening our
Where's Turkey going?
Yeah.
Basically, the money that you're raising is for the drilling in other places, and it's Procea's job to raise the money for the joint venture, or?
Well, it's our joint responsibility to raise the 25 million for the joint venture company, but it's being secured at the joint venture company level. At this point in time, Prussia are not interested in going off and finding any more resources. They're satisfied with the current resources and reserves in the feasibility study, and we've shown that it works. Their intention now is to move as rapidly as possible into the construction phase and get this mine up and running. Then it falls back on us later to continue identifying resources in the region that we can feed into the plant. So It's a partnership that works very well because they've got all the expertise to run the plant and the mine, but they don't have the expertise to identify new resources or to really understand the geology. And they've absolutely categorically stated they don't want to develop an expertise in that. They want us to do it.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Please help yourself to tea and coffee and biscuits.
Go back to just the first.